Yeah. Time to get it on. Yo, check it out, y'all. I'm drawing my light bulb, the legs. I'm sketching fast. Got the legs wide apart, too. Then, it's too low. So I just draw it up further up on the page because my feet were kind of coming off. And now I'm adding the arms, adding the head. Yeah, the body can fit. Now I'm tightening it up because I sketched it real light. I did it like Todd Nook or Knock. Todd Knock would do it. He's very sketchy. I'm normally not that sketchy. Got the center line going. Rib cage, abdominals. Yeah, got that chest, shoulder. As you notice, I did kind of line up some perspective lines so I could put it in perspective and have them kind of in that forced perspective way. I'm kind of measuring everything up one line, measured from another. Now the hips. Okay, looking at the legs, the arms, thicking those arms up. Okay, this is, by the way, Wonder Man. That's right. That's who I'm drawing today, Wonder Man. Why Wonder Man? Because it's a wonder, man. Anyway, all right. So again, you can see I'm kind of lining up the shoulders, trying to get the arms how I want them. That arm back a little bit. All right. Now I'm going in with a little detail. Only do the detail when you are ready to commit to that pose, that whatever. So I'm ready to commit. I guess I like what I see. You can still change it though. Even if you like what you see, you can still change it. So center line, now I'm getting the rib cage, boom, boom, boom. All right, going back up to the chest. Should have shoulders good and round, bicep good and round, tricep up on that shoulder. Everything is relative, so I'm relating one aspect to another aspect. All right, now I'm tightening up the head and said, nah, let me throw in this bottom abdominal and this love handle. And I'm looking, what I'm looking at these legs. I need to bring these legs in. It looks like a hero, but I don't want it to look that heroic. That's too heroic. And that's always the battle that artists have to kind of contend with in comics. How realistic do you want your images to be versus how cartoony and stylistic do you want them to be? So realistic versus stylistic. So when you personally, I want my heroes to look like heroes. If an artist makes their characters look like real life characters, then take a picture. I mean, you can use picture as a reference, but I wouldn't draw everything that's on the picture like the picture. As a matter of fact, I'm using reference for this right here, for this Wonder Man pose. I'll talk about that a little later, but right now I'm making sure I get the details of the face, lining up the pose. All right, putting the details. It's looks kind of fuzzy, 1, and 2. I draw real light. Why do I draw light? Why you draw light, Ron Mac? So that when I erase, I don't leave any marks on the paper. I just put a thin line of carbon on the paper so that if I have to erase, I won't damage anything. I can erase it pretty smoothly. All right. So Again, reiterating these muscles. Looking, I'm thinking, looking and thinking, comparing one proportion to another. Looking at the perspective. One fist will be one way. If it's a quote unquote parallel fist, then with the fist kind of looking palms up, then the other one will be kind of palms up, but their palms diagonally up. Yeah, I made that word up. So anyway, it's kind of committing to this line. Okay, I like that. I like that. Okay. Leg is getting pushed back. So make sure I get the arm bands. And if you hear the dog in the back, yes, that's dog. That is the dog. Okay. Man, I really appreciate artists who can push the perspective. All right, now I'm erasing everything I just drew after I got everything right. What am I doing? Well, like I said, I didn't draw it too dark, and I'm not erasing it all the way, actually. I'm erasing it to get all the straight lines out, but I'm leaving enough of it. And I made sure I made parts of it a little darker than other parts so that when I come back at this stage, I can add the details I want to add. So now collar, looking at the design of the suit, I'm checking out my reference during all of this. I'm saying, okay, how does this suit look? So I'm looking at my reference of the Wonder Man from the series, the first series that Disney and Marvel put out. I'm looking at it and I'm saying, okay, the suit has seams here, has wristbands here. How many parts of the wristband are they? You know, I'm looking at all that. And I'm figuring out, okay, now that I see how it is, how do I want to change that? So some of it I change because, ironically, they put a lot of things, doodads and seams and crazy stuff in these costumes for these heroes in these movies and in these television series. If I had to draw all of that detail in a comic, it would take forever. It would take forever, man. So some people can do that, but there are a lot of artists who look at a costume and say, yeah, I can do it for a pinup, like I'm doing right now, but I would not want to do that for a whole book. I've heard professional artists, some of the best, say that about things. Ironically, Spider-Man is one of those costumes that some major artists say, man, I would love to draw Spider-Man, but I hate to draw Spider-Man. All those lines, all those details. Yeah. I too would love to draw Spider-Man, but would hate to draw Spider-Man. You know, the love part is, man, all the positions and poses and crazy things you could do with the body. The part I wouldn't like is, of course, all that detail, right? All those lines and how precise you have to be. It's not just the lines, but how precise you have to be rounding the body with those webbings. Anyway, I'm not drawing Spidey right now, and I've drawn them a lot of times for commissions and others. Speaking of that, all right, so like, subscribe, follow, friend me, connect, kick it with me. Most of all, get Mctivated. If you want a commission, which this is not a commission, I just wanted to draw them. If you want a commission done, just hit me up. Info is in the description. Remember to stay comic book bold in everything you do, right? Comic books are bold in color, bold in heroes. As a matter of fact, that's how I like to draw my heroes, heroic, right? I already mentioned that. And so who is this hero again? This is Wonder Man. Speaking of drawing people heroic, I think the first time I really encountered Wonder Man and knew who he was, I have books with him in it, but I didn't realize that, again, I follow comics because I'm an artist, and I follow comics because I'm an artist just for the art. I don't. So I may know artists' names and work that they've done and not even know the story behind any of it. So with this Wonder Man, Jeff Johnson, I remember when he was doing the book in the 90s, Jeff Johnson, it was like before Image, but it sort of had that Image look to it. I really thought he was sort of a Paul Smith type of artist. He was a little more angular and sharper than a Paul Smith because Paul was smooth, but they had sort of the same look to me, or a similar look. And I appreciated both of them. And he was on the Wonder Man book, so I would buy Wonder Man to look at Jeff Johnson's art. And I can say without a doubt that I did not read the Wonder Man comic book when I bought it. I just bought it strictly for the art, right? So anyway, this is a different suit right here. This suit right here is from that first series, and that's what I was referencing. And I've already talked about Marvel and Disney putting this series out, and of course they changed them up a little bit. Mainly, they made him a black man, and another way they changed him up. I don't know if they mentioned his powers as being ionic powers, but I started looking up Wonder Man because I knew I was going to draw him. And again, I'm not a historian of storylines and plots and who wrote what. I'm in it for the artist. So I did not realize that this man's mind, Wonder Man's mind, was the consciousness used for vision in the comic books. I did not know Stan Lee and Jack Kirby created this character. I knew he was in West Coast Avengers. I did know that. A founding member. That was thanks to an artist, John Byrne, I believe. But I didn't really know a lot about him other than the fact that I liked Jeff Johnson drawing him in the comic book in the 90s. So, in the series that I'm taking this suit from, man, he really has some anger issues, Wonder Man, right? And I'm always, as an educator and as a motivational speaker, speaking to people about their anger management. And I will say that one thing I know for certain is that I do have a gift for anger management. I can definitely say that. I have even been accused of not having enough anger, even as an activist and advocate for youth and other people I can definitely turn on whatever I need to turn on. However, yeah, I'm not an angry person, never been, and I've been said to be lack the emotion I need. So anger has never been an issue for me, uh, which is cool, and I'm able to say from my perspective how someone can, um, you know, rid themselves and practice not being angry if they just follow some simple options. Because any advice I give is not the answer, but an option. And I think if you get any quote unquote professional who thinks that what they're giving you is the only way, you probably need to check with somebody else, because there's always more than one way to skin a cat, is the old phrase. So in the series, Wonder Man had an anger issue. So I could see all those things happening to him, and I was thinking about, I know how to remedy that. If I only had a couple sessions with him, I could get him activated. Anyway, I'm working on this leather now. I've established where my light source is. I've shaded the arms. Now I'm shading the legs. But again, I'm putting in all this detail that if I had to draw this every day, every page, every panel, I would definitely simplify it. And that's why you see a lot of artists, they actually do simplify these costumes in the comic books. And I won't say all artists, because you can see some comic books and you'll be like, wow, you put in every detail. And it goes to what I was saying earlier about how realistic do you want your images, your drawings to be as a comic book artist. Now that I've established some light source and where everything needs to be, I got my old trusty paintbrush tip pen. I'm leaving a rim light around the figure again, which is not totally realistic, but it goes to that making your character look heroic part of this. Especially when I add my finishing touch, the one that I like so much. Man, that rhymed. The finishing touch that I love so much. Making sure to go with where the muscles are with these leather pants. Oh, and now I'm like, oh, okay. And I debated, as an artist, sometimes you debate with yourself, what tool will I use for what? I could have easily just darkened in this whole area, which would have been quicker. And actually, I probably should have. Instead of going down each individual area of this, or what would I call this? Texture of this particular part of the pants. I just said, I'm gonna do it the hard way. So what I'm doing right now is the hard way. The easy way, or a easier way, would have been to just darken all that in and use my white pen to draw the lines back in. So now I'm on to the knee pads. As I was looking at this costume, I found a reference online And I said to myself, I think this is cool. I found one that I could say, yeah, let me isolate this so I can get this costume down. He had a lot more detail in the boots. Actually, I couldn't see all of it. So I simplified it, you know. And you know how leather is, it's kind of reflective. So you have the rim light, you have the shading, you have the center highlight, and you have the shading, and you have the rim highlight on the other side. So kind of get that leathery effect, latex effect. I'll tell you what, you know, I'm speaking about this after I've drawn it, because while I draw this, I'm listening to a game or the radio or music, or, yep, I still listen to the radio. I was a disc jockey forever and been on radio since 95. So I have a long history of radio, hip hop and R&B, Power 92 Jams. That was my station. Yeah, it's Ron Mac, the main sticker. Yeah, I had that voice, and I often have to use it when I host things, or even when I'm doing my motivational speaking. Sometimes I bring that out. I remember doing a commencement at a college, at a university, and I started with my radio voice. Everybody was like, oh. I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about this drawing, man. Yo, anyway, so got these leather boots down, and as I told you, that's my favorite part, the outline, which is the calligraphy line. Calligraphy meaning that it gets thin and thick, variant widths. It doesn't stay consistently the same. Yeah. Now, I talked about heroic poses. Let me mention somebody I admire who does heroic poses like nobody else. That's George Perez. You know, when I say heroic poses, I mean, if somebody's drinking coffee, they drink coffee heroically. You know what I'm saying? If they're reading a book, they're reading heroically. And some artists, you know, some artists are criticized for doing that. Like this stance that I'm drawing right now, nobody really stands like this, you know, with their arms at like a 60-degree angle at their side, and, you know, fists, palms diagonally up in the air. You know what I'm saying? Like, people don't really stand like this. But George Perez, he knew how to make people look heroic. So I thought it was a heroic pose over a realistic pose. And so that's why I drew it like that. And that's why George Perez, hey, God bless the dead. Man, I had the pleasure of meeting him at a Dragon Con in Atlanta, which is cool. He was just walking around, and to my surprise, nobody was going up to him. I was like, y'all don't know this is the great George Perez? Teen Titan, Wonder Woman, George Perez, the man, the myth, the legend, George Perez. So we actually, it was to my benefit because we were able to talk for an extended period of time. And yeah, he was a cool dude, man. Cool dude. George Perez knows how to draw people heroically. And this kind of looks like a George Perez pose to me, you know. I wasn't thinking that when I did it, but it does. It does. But I think all the greats kind of use this. You know, Jim Lee does very heroic poses. His heroes look like heroes. I was talking about that you know, that line or that feeling of how realistic is this going to be versus how stylized will it be. Jim is getting more and more realistic as he moves forth on his streams and other things. So, you know, and he often comments on how he'll redraw something in more realistic proportions. I like the heroic stuff, man. I like it. Yeah. So, and that's what I look at Jim Lee for, because he knows how to do that real good. He can do it. All right. So, thinking, now that I've inked this man, what am I gonna do now? Okay, getting the collar down. Every time I pull back, I'm thinking, what kind of background can I do? I know. So, in the series, he would always leave these craters wherever he was standing, and it would be rippled out from where he stood. So I thought about that. I put a dot in the middle of his stance and then kind of went out from there. And then the ion energy that he would let off would just kind of go everywhere and radiate from his body. So I kind of used the center of his chest as that radiating point, and then put in some of these special effects, right? So honestly, I was thinking, how could I do this? And I thought about another favorite artist of mine, Brett Booth. And even though I am not doing what Brett Booth does exactly, I was inspired by how he does this radiating energy thing. So that's what I'm doing now, as I create these ripples and this wave of energy. You know, I'm trying to make mine more random. I think when he does it, he does something like this and then he erases lines in it, which is super cool, man. You know, that's part of that tool. What tool will you use for what, right? It's like, am I going to use a white pen? Am I going to use an eraser? Will I change it later digitally? Which, I don't know. I've been drawing since forever, so I don't particularly like changing stuff digitally. I like, you know, let me put every effect I can on the paper first. For instance, when somebody buys my commission, I don't want them to not see the energy. I don't want them to not see the power. Now I'm putting the little shake marks around the hand because in the series of Wonder Man, they had that. Well, it's time to go now, because here is my signature. That's it, Wonder Man, baby. Oh yeah, and I even made it in color. Boom. There it is.
Leron McAdoo found joy in drawing superheroes. but he was an illiterate third grader, so suddenly his mother said she would not buy another comic book until he could read them. McAdoo rose above being afraid of words to getting paid for words. Now he uses words to get people Mctivated about their own superpower. He drew strength from drawing. This is Comicbook Bold. To see his comic commissions and comic art, go to pinterest.com at that hip hop and select Leron McAdoo art.